It's great to have everyone here. Thanks for joining us. My name is Paul. My partner helping out today will be Reshma, and we're on the product team here at IdeaScale. We're
Hi,
really excited to
everyone.
walk through our latest feature release, which is Workspaces. Workspaces is a project that we've been working on for a while, and we're thrilled that we're able to announce it today and walk through some of the biggest benefits that we can look forward to experiencing. So if we want to look at our agenda for today, on this webinar, we're going to walk through some of the key features of Workspaces while also touch on the high-level benefits, changes, and expectations that everyone can have going into this. Our agenda is going to begin with the discussion on what is Workspaces to get a clear definition. We'll then discuss some of the benefits and changes that users should expect with the project. Following that, we're going to do a live demo to walk through Workspaces and highlight some of those changes that we discussed and show generally what's going to be new. And then finally, we're going to answer some key questions about Workspaces and share some resources to learn more so everyone is fully prepared for the migration. That's going to include some technical details as well about the Workspace migration. So to start us off, we're going to discuss what is Workspaces. A workspace is a top-level structure designed above communities to organize and manage communities, members, and ideas collectively. On the graphic here, you're going to see how Workspaces sits above the community scope, enabling us to manage communities side by side. Functionally, this means admins can now manage multiple communities under the same workspace rather than having them completely separate. This also means that users are able to easily switch between communities to participate in a wider array of campaigns that they have access to. So that's the very high-level definition of what Workspaces is. Now that we've walked through that quickly, let's move on to some of the key benefits that this unlocks for people. So some of the main benefits to start off is centralized management. Workspaces provides a centralized platform for managing multiple communities, and this helps streamline administration of those communities. This includes member management as well. There's updated member and group management, which enables greater configuration when setting up a workspace and when managing a community. Consistent security guidelines is another advantage. Workspace settings are passed down to all the communities under the workspace, which simplifies initial setup and management. As new communities are created, they will follow the security policy and settings of the workspace to ensure all of the requirements are met on the security side. Additionally, there is enhanced collaboration possible through Workspaces. Members can easily join and participate in multiple communities accessible to them in the workspace. This allows them to generally add their thoughts on much more content throughout different communities. And in order to do this, they have a simplified navigation menu. When users are using multiple communities, there's a simplified navigation system so they can easily switch between communities and campaigns and navigate easily between those. Finally, there are new profile updates in Workspaces. The member profile section has been overhauled, providing a new interface for members to view profile details and personal action items on. This applies to all users, members, admins, and everyone involved can benefit from this. So now we have a very high-level definition of Workspaces. We have an understanding of what the benefits are. I'm going to take over the screen share quickly, and we're going to start the demo. Let me make sure I have this right. Let me know if we're having trouble seeing this, and I can change my screen. So,
Looks great, Paul.
okay, perfect. Thank you. So to walk through the demo, we're going to begin with the login experience. This workspace login page is going to be unique for each workspace. All the communities under that workspace will log in through this screen. This login page is going to have all of the approved login methods from the workspace admin. And so all of those methods will show up here. This can also include single sign-on methods here if communities have those set up. The first thing we're going to walk through is the experience when navigating to a workspace that has a single community accessible. The credentials you see here are for an end user who only has access to one community within the workspace. So let's see what their experience is like logging in. So I go to the workspace, I log in, and this user will be directed directly to their community landing or community home, whichever is configured as default. So as an end user, if I only have access to a single community, I'm still going to be able to navigate directly to that community and participate here. Single community workspaces will still benefit from the user interface improvements of this project, along with the ability to easily create new communities within the existing framework, rather than disrupting their organization to build new communities. So with the understanding of a single community workspace, we now want to look at what a multiple community workspace looks like. I'm going to log out from this user, and I'm going to log in with the credentials of a different user. Let's go back to the workspace home here, and then let's log in here. I'm going to be Billy for the next couple minutes. Okay, so we're back at the workspace home, we're logging in again, and now we're logging in as a member that has access to multiple communities in the workspace. Here, we're going to land on the workspace homepage. On this page, a member can see all of the communities that they can access, including communities that they are already a member of, communities that they have been invited to, and communities that they can join. We know public communities are joinable as of now. It's the same in Workspaces, but you can also have private communities that are joinable. This is a new setting that we're introducing. Admins can configure their workspace so that private communities can be joinable with users across the workspace. This provides more options to have increased participation and collaboration, even on something that is private to people outside of your workspace. Before we navigate any further, I'm going to also show what the admin experience looks like in this page, and then use that account to walk through the other workspace details. Hopefully you liked my background. So this is the admin experience on the workspace homepage. I've logged in as a workspace admin, and I can see a couple of key details here as well. I can see the number of members in my workspace. From here, you're able to add members to the workspace, create a new community, and see billing and subscription details. That's what the workspace homepage is like. Before I navigate away, you can also use this favorite button here to add communities to the top of the list. So if I click this, I can see that this community goes to the front, and now this is an effort to make for admins and end users the communities they use the most set to the top of their page so they can navigate to them more easily. The second item we want to talk about on this page is the new top bar. So the top bar has been reworked a little bit, and there are some new features that enable better navigation, like I mentioned earlier. I'm going to start from the right side here. There's a universal profile dropdown for admins and end users, so everyone can benefit from the simplicity here. There's an app menu, which we've introduced. So this will show the different apps that were previously under the profile dropdown, and they can be accessed from here. More information on this to come as I go through the navigation, but one key thing to note here is that this menu will be dynamic, updating with the user role and permission. So if a user doesn't have access to any of these tools, they won't be able to navigate and see these here. The search function now has community information as well as campaign and idea information that were on the workspace scope. And then if we look in the top left up here, we have a workspace logo. The workspace logo will be persistent across the entire workspace and can be a configured image and URL similar to now. And then this is the main thing we're going to walk through next, which is the new community switcher. This switcher here is similar to the campaign switcher as it operates now, but also allows us to navigate between communities. If I see these three dots here, that's how I know I'm in the workspace scope. If I select this, I then get a drop-down that shows all of the communities within my workspace. I'm going to go ahead and select one of these, which will navigate me into the community page, again, home or landing, depending on which is the default for that community. From here, I can then open the campaign switcher like we know now. Everyone should be familiar with the campaign switcher. And from here, you can navigate into campaigns within a community. You can also navigate back to the workspace easily. By default, the workspace logo will take you to the workspace homepage, but you can also open the community switcher and use this back button here to make that easy. I'm going to go back to the workspace page, and I'm going to discuss a detail about navigation that's important for admins to understand. So This switcher for end users will be a navigation tool. For admins, it will also function as a navigation tool, but it has an additional layer of functionality when you're using these apps, like I mentioned previously. So the navigation, this switcher doesn't only navigate you to community pages, it will also take you between different workspace or community scope when you're in these apps. So I've gone to the app menu, I select manage workspace. I'm now in the workspace settings. You can see by the language here and by the 3 dots here that I'm in the workspace page. From here, if I go and select a community, instead of going to that community page, I'm now going to be taken to the community settings. So I can see that the community name is here with the language. I can tell I'm on the community page. And also from the dropdown here, I can tell I'm on the community page. If I navigate back to the workspace, again, I'm going to go to the workspace settings. So this dropdown doesn't only function as engagement navigation for users, but also tool navigation for admins. This is going to transition us nicely to talk about some of the member management changes we can expect with workspaces and how this navigation tool relates to those. I'm in the workspace scope right now. I'm going to go ahead and navigate to member management to walk through some of these changes here. Our member management tool now has a workspace and community scope, as well as some new features. It's important to note that members are now hosted on the workspace level rather than the community level. So all members within the workspace will be added here and then can be applied to communities from there. That's how they will become community members, and that's how we will configure the workspace. Once they're in the community can then be configured like normal. One thing I'll show here quickly is when selecting a member, we now have an informative side panel that opens up. This side panel will have key details on that member, as well as badges that show their membership status in different communities. This is a helpful way to get key information on the member, also shows some similar information on the community scope when you open it up, and it's just a good way to get a status update on that specific member. On top of that, we now have group management on this tab right here. In the top right, if you select groups, you can now look at the workspace groups. And if you're on the community level, you can look at the community groups. Quickly, I'm going to go over workspace groups because they're completely new. When you're on the workspace groups page, there are a couple of key actions that you can take. One, you can create a new group. This new group might be of users throughout the workspace that you want to auto-assign people to. You can also select a group and add it to a community. You can add groups from the workspace to a community. Like I said earlier, you can apply those members down into the community scope. You can also select multiple workspace groups and add them to a new combined group. These 3 functionalities are really important for us to understand because they build some of the tools which enables admins to easily apply members from the workspace to their communities and do so with simple configuration that they can set up. So if I wanted to combine 2 of my groups to add them to this new community, you can easily do that here. The whole goal of this, again, is to make communities more accessible to users and to lower the burden of that for admins. I've touched briefly on navigation and member management. I'm going to go here and I'm going to show what that looks like just for another example of the navigation tool. If I'm on workspace member management and I go and I select one of these communities, I will then be taken to the community member management. You can see this is the user I logged in with earlier. And we can see some other details on users here. We can see profile questions, for example, if they are required. And then you can also see community groups here as well. And you can tell if it's a workspace or a community group. Now that we have a quick understanding of how the navigation works for communities, for settings, and for member management, and what some of the quick member management changes are, we are going to touch on the profile updates. I mentioned earlier how there's been a profile overhaul, which enables us to show more details about a user profile and change the UI of how users interact with their profile. I'll show what this looks like here. So when you navigate to your profile, you then show up in the profile page. This is entirely reworked to hopefully provide the most important information to users right off the bat. You can see that you navigate to My Ideas tab for your own profile. From here, you can see by default action items associated with this specific community. From here, you can both change the categorization of ideas that is shown, as well as change the community at which you're filtering by. You can change to a different community here, and this will show a different set of action items for you, different set of submitted ideas. Ideally, this is a way that users can engage with the most important and priority content as it is relevant to their profile without having to search through each community by itself. You can see community and edit community information here. Sorry, you can see and edit workspace information. Like I said earlier, the profiles live on the workspace scope rather than the community scope, so users can benefit from a shared identity across communities. From here, you can see those details, and if you have multiple identities from logins, you can see the different identity details here. If you navigate to a different user's community, so we're here looking at what it looks like to navigate to my own profile. If you want to navigate to a different user's profile, I should say, you will be taken to the About page. This profile About will show you different information on where that member is active. It can show you information on ideas they have submitted or they follow. And so from here, you can kind of get a streamlined idea on where people are participating. If you want to follow them, if you want to work on their ideas with them, you can get an idea of that there. So we've gone over a lot today. There's a lot of stuff that's changing. I want to pause quickly to discuss some of the things that won't be changing with Workspaces, because we've talked about a lot of changes. Some of the things that won't be changing for end users are their login credentials. First and foremost, end users will not have to log in with new credentials. Their existing credentials will map to the workspaces that are created. For people using social login or single sign-on, they might have to revalidate their credentials upon the initial entry, but after that will proceed as normal. But again, they will not need new credentials for their workspace. Their old ones will do. I talked a little bit about the single community experience. It's important to note what is changing for the single community experience. These UI changes will benefit users on the single community experience, but other than that, the participation in those communities will remain nearly identical. So the ability of submitting ideas, reviewing ideas, working on them with teammates, that will all remain the same, but the ability to navigate between communities will change. And again, if you're leveraging only a single community, users will be able to navigate directly to that community, so their experience will be minimally altered. Finally, we've talked a little bit, I've mentioned about the migration to Workspaces. During the migration, we're going to be transferring all of the data from the previous community structure to the new workspace configuration. During this process, there will be no loss of data, so you can remain secure that all of your community data will be transferred properly to the new workspace structure. I want to make that very clear as things that will not be changing. We're going to be receiving some big updates with Workspaces, but you can also remain secure that your data will be safe. Laura, I'm going to hand the screen back to you so we can move on to the next phase of the webinar. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. Now that we've talked about Workspaces a little bit, we are going to later get into some questions about Workspaces along with some technical details about the migration. But before we get there, it's important to acknowledge where this leaves us within IdeaScale. So Workspaces brings a lot of exciting changes to our platform, and it's only the beginning of what should be an exciting year of product development. We're planning some other big changes that help build really meaningfully on Workspaces. These include the aggregation of idea data. All idea data from various communities will be aggregated, which offers a complete overview of innovation across an organization or a workspace. Similar to how this works with the community home displaying ideas from different campaigns, the workspace can provide a unified view of all ideas accessible within the user's communities and campaigns. This is particularly meaningful in the context of user engagement. With this aggregation, we can add an engagement dashboard where users can see and engage with ideas across different scopes. Like we showed with action items, we can show users the ideas that are most primed for their engagement, that need their engagement or need someone of their expertise. That's an important way Workspaces can benefit us here. A similar thing we can talk about in the future is the moving of ideas between communities. It's going to be possible for us to move ideas between different communities within the workspace. This is enabling better sharing and collaboration on ideas, as well as engagement from users. And this also allows you to engage a much more diverse set of users within your workspace on ideas. And we all know innovation is better as a collaborative effort. And so this is an effort to increase collaboration and diversity within innovation efforts. Finally, it's important to discuss a reporting upgrade. We're looking forward to a new completely configurable reporting dashboard and data interface for admins. This is going to fundamentally change how customers engage with data in our platform. And I think that's something that's really excited that we can set our sights on. So with that in mind, I want to come back to Workspaces really quickly and talk about some migration details and namely how the URLs will be changing. Before we get into the general questions, I think it's important to address these. First and foremost, all communities will need to migrate to Workspaces. So during this migration, there will be short periods of downtime that everyone can expect with their communities. We're going to be doing the migration over the weekends in late September and October, and we've listed all the exact times and dates in our migration FAQ article, which we published recently. That article will be sending out today as well, along as email follow-ups with the resource information. So you can be sure to find it there, and it's all listed. The exact time of migration over the weekend will vary per community, and that's really based on the size of the data that needs to move. And besides one or two outliers, all communities should complete migration over the weekend. So this should be minimally disruptive to all customers. During the migration process, we will be changing the URLs. The URL structures are going to change, and you will have the opportunity to manually set what your URLs would like to be. So you can understand the new URL structure here, and that's important because we're going to be manually setting them. On the graphic here, we're showing what the workspace, community, and idea URL structure will look like after the migration. With the assistance of the customer success manager and our supporting documentation, you're going to be able to manually set what URL you would like your workspace to take and what the community identifiers will be for communities that fall under that workspace. You can choose to make the new workspace URL the same as the community that you had, or choose something completely different. This applies to custom domains as well. You're able to, if you have a custom domain, if you're leveraging a custom domain, you are going to be able to take the existing custom domain that you have, or you have an option to take a new one. It's totally up to you, but the URL structure will need to be updated in order for the migration. Now, we've covered a lot today. It's important that we move on to some key questions that we've received about Workspaces and about these features. Before we get into the questions themselves, it's important to note that we have plenty of supporting documentation regarding these changes. I've talked a lot about how this affects admins, users, different configuration of Workspaces, the settings required, the migration itself. There's a lot that we're getting through here, and it's important to note that our documentation fully covers all of this. This documentation includes a dedicated Workspaces landing page to get key details, a release note discussing the main feature changes in Workspaces, a migration article outlining all the technical changes that we can expect and the URL structure that should be anticipated. And then additionally, we fully updated our support articles with information regarding how Workspaces will affect all parts of the platform. So we should be sending some of that information out today. And like I said earlier, we're going to follow up in an email with all that information. It can all be found on our website as well. There's a ton of places you can find that information, and it has a ton of meaningful details like I've discussed today. I know Laura mentioned at the beginning of the webinar that we're also going to be sharing this as a recording. So if there's anything that I've said here that you might have forgotten and want to go back and reference, that'll be available too. Okay, we're going to move on to some of the common questions we've received with the Workspace migration and the change with Workspaces. And so if you have any questions, hopefully this will help you answer those as well. The main question we want to ask up front that we get a lot is, why use multiple communities and not more campaigns? Communities allow for unique customization and privacy control, which campaigns cannot provide on their own. Each community can have their own distinct group of users, their own authentication methods, unique branding, language support, and specific settings. And the combination of all of those and the configuration that applies can create a more customized and secure environment than can be achieved through campaigns. Another common question is, if you have multiple communities with different sets of users, those might be internal users and external, think like employees and contractors or employees and customers. Can you apply those members to specific campaigns within other communities? This is possible in Workspaces. So yes, you're able to add all users to the workspace level and then easily divide them into appropriate communities. Like I said earlier, the members live on the workspace level and then are applied down to communities. These communities can be configured to be totally separate from one another or can share users between them. And it doesn't have to be a binary approach like that either. You can have two communities with internal and external users. You can have specific logins set for each of those communities. You can then share a certain set of users from community A to a certain set of information in community B, and you can configure it at which you'd like in order to keep security requirements the same and in order to provide access to the necessary content that you want to within those different communities. I mentioned it briefly before, but another key question about workspace access is around mixed login authentication. How does mixed login authentication work with Workspaces if we're putting communities under the same umbrella? So I'll generally say how this works, and then I'll apply a specific example. So for Workspaces that support mixed authentication, and if that's too technical of a term, mixed authentication essentially means each of the login methods. So that could be email login, that could be single sign-on, or social login through Microsoft or Apple or something like that. So if you have multiple communities in your workspace that each require a different login method, the user is going to have to log in and authenticate with each of those methods in order to access all of the communities. What this means, so if I go to community A and I log in with my email, I can then access the community that requires email login, but the other community requires SSO. What's going to happen is if I go to select the SSO community, I am going to have to log in and authenticate with SSO as well. That's going to give me authentication access to that second community. Then in the future, we can tell that those accounts are linked, again, because the profiles on the workspace level, the emails are the same for those. So we can tell that they're linked. So if you log in with either of those methods in the future, you're able to access both of the required communities. So this hopefully finds a balance for us where we can retain the security requirements from multiple different communities and multiple authentication. And we can also make it so the user doesn't have to jump through multiple hurdles every single time they log in. They'll only have to authenticate with that information once, and then they'll be able to access their communities easily. So that's generally an overview on how mixed login authentication works. Again, we'll have more resources on that if it seems a bit technical to make it easier to understand. I mentioned earlier what the plan is for custom domains during migration. If you have a custom domain, a single custom domain, you can map that custom domain to your workspace URL, or you can choose a new one. A question rises if you have multiple custom domains and you want to keep those custom domains. In this scenario, what would happen is you would be able to transfer a single custom domain to a single workspace. If you want to use a second custom domain, you would create a second workspace to support that custom domain. And if you're okay merging them, then you would have one custom domain with multiple communities. If it's vital that they're separate, they would just operate as separate workspaces and would be similar to how they operate today in terms of their domains. That leads me nicely into a next question about subscription models. So if we have multiple communities under a workspace, Can new communities be created under different licenses, or do they require the same license? This is kind of a billing and subscription question. So it's important to note that communities can be created under different subscriptions within the same workspace. So you can have two communities that are on completely different subscriptions, different licenses, but they're operating within the same workspace. An example of this might be, I'm an organization and I have two different departments that have their own communities, and they manage the financing for those communities separately, but they want to share users and they want to collaborate within the organization. How do we make that happen? Well, you can add both of those communities under a single workspace. They can remain on their individual license, which keeps their parameters and pricing for the communities different, but they can also benefit from the shared user base and collaboration that's possible in Workspaces. Okay, that was a lot of questions. And I know there are some questions that we've been talking about in the chat as well. I want to get to some of those here. There is a question about moving or cloning ideas across campaigns from different communities. As I mentioned quickly in the slide about features coming soon, this is something we're very excited to work on currently. This feature is going to be available in the coming months, we hope, and is going to allow you to, again, either duplicate or move ideas from different campaigns into different communities. This is a big benefit for idea collaboration between members, and again, increasing the diversity of thought on ideas. So your head's in the right place. We're working on that currently. Another question about exporting data. Can you pull reports or export data for users per community? The answer to this is yes. You're still able to pull exports per community, similar to the navigation I showed on member management. That will also be accessible for the reporting tool. So you're able to pull idea data and member data per community like you can today. Another question about member profile questions. So can you create member profile questions on the community and or workspace level? The answer is yes to both. You're able to create and configure profile questions at both the workspace and the community level. A place where this might apply is if you have a shared set of users across the entire workspace, and you might want to apply a set of profile questions to everyone that joins. You can set workspace profile questions so that everyone is sure to answer those. And then they split up into their different communities and they're working on different innovation tasks. They can have different profile questions per community to make sure that they're getting all the necessary information there, but they've already answered the overarching workspace profile questions. Okay. Another question about action items. So there's a question around who will get action items. If there's an idea in a refinement stage, and in the refinement, there's a question on who in the refinement team will receive that action items. If they have answered it, will it then remove it from the list for that person, or will it stay until the idea has moved stages? Action items today are kind of work like you can imagine a task. Those who have been assigned a specific action items would see them there. And so that is mainly for, like you said, like stage refinement or specific stage actions. The user will have an action item to complete that action. And then they can also subscribe to get an email digest based on the tasks required. So this can be an overview of the tasks that they have received and the tasks available to them in that scope, the community scope. We have another question here about social login. How will Workspaces affect a new member when using their social login? So the login options are set on the workspace level. As I showed on the login screen, each workspace login screen will show the login options that the workspace admin has approved. And so if the workspace admin has approved social login, the user will navigate to the login screen. There are two cases that I'll discuss here. One, when the user is logging in for the very first time in the workspace, they will have to validate their social login credentials, similar to single sign-on. They'll just have to validate them once, similar to when they set up social login in the first place. After they've validated once, they will enter into the workspace or the community if it's a single community instance. From there, their social login will proceed as normal. And so if we imagine, like I said earlier, with the mixed authentication, if there's a workspace that has multiple authentication methods available and multiple communities that require different authentication methods, they are going to have to log in with whatever the required method is for that community if they want to access that content. That is to ensure security parameters around who has access to what content. From there, once they're able to validate that information, then they'll be able to log in easily without validating every single time. So I hope that answered your question on social login. There's a question on adding communities to the workspace. So how do you add another community to the workspace? So if you want to add new communities or existing communities to the workspace, existing communities will be able to be migrated during the migration. And from there, you can also contact your customer success manager or your IdeaScale rep, and they can help you add new communities to either your license or to the workspace that you've created. There's another question, so hopefully that answers around new communities and adding new communities. I think that's an exciting use case. That's what we really built Workspaces to do. And so using multiple communities is going to provide a lot of value there. There's another question around the release schedule. This is one of the last questions that we have here. So people are asking when the schedule is for releasing Workspaces and when will that occur for you? So this depends what server you're on. In the migration article, we have an outline on how each server will be migrated. From there, you can be able to tell which weekend your migration is happening and when the release is. For most instances, that is on the same weekend. And so from there, you will be able to access the information on when exactly you're going to be migrated, when there will be downtime, and what that downtime will look like. After that, you should be able to access Workspaces easily. The migration is always going to start on Friday afternoon, I believe like 5, 6 p.m. Friday afternoon. And then the migration will go until all of the communities are finished. Again, that usually takes within the weekend, so there's no need to worry. Your community won't be down the entire time. It will just be down for the time of migration, and the migration happens procedurally. I know this is a little technical, but hopefully it's helping answer your question. So from Friday night on the server you're on, you will be down until the migration is finished for your specific community. And from there, you should be able to access Workspaces easily. And so on Monday, for everyone, it should be up and running. There's a good question about URLs and redirects for URLs. So as I showed earlier, the URL structure is changing with Workspaces. And the existing community URLs are obviously going to be different. And so if you have maybe external sheets or links stored elsewhere that have the old URL, how are you going to be able to navigate to the workspace? For all community URLs that exist today, we are going to support redirects for 6 months. And in our documentation, we can provide an exact date towards when that support will end. So for 6 months, you will be able to successfully redirect from the existing community links to your new workspace. After that, you'll be required to update those links to the new workspace URLs so there is no outage when someone tries to select the link and it doesn't work. Within that 6 months, you'll have to update to workspace URLs. There's a question about elaborating on forthcoming enhancements to reporting. I would love to elaborate on that. I'm really excited about it. It's something I've been working on personally for a long time. I don't have anything to show today. We're going to have another webinar in the future to discuss reporting, as it's going to be a really powerful change. What we're hoping to begin development on it soon, but we don't have a specific timeline for you yet. What we're hoping to do with our reporting tool is provide a configurable dashboard for reporting. This is something that would allow you to create unique charts and dashboards for all of your data within communities or campaigns. This is going to allow you to send out reports to people around that data and really just dive into the exact pieces of data that are more impactful for you and your organization, and hopefully provide more metrics that can be useful for decision-making around your communities. So hopefully that provides a little teaser of information on reporting without going too in depth. And again, in the future, we will have a ton of materials around reporting, as it's going to be a really valuable change for us. There's also a question around how this relates to our greater roadmap. We also have a page to our product roadmap. This is accessible publicly online. We're totally in support of building in public here, and so we have our product roadmap available, and this updates as we make updates to it, either in certain projects or in smaller changes that we try to release procedurally. This link will also be available in the follow-up materials and should be available on our website if you're interested in seeing more information on the bigger or smaller projects that we're going to be working on. I think the link was just provided in the chat. Thank you, Laura.
You're welcome.
Another question about documentation here. Is there a document or a website with some of this information in writing that we can provide to users/customers? Yes. So the migration article, the release note, the web page, the support articles, these are all accessible online. We've already published them in advance of the migration. The first migration date, I believe, is September 27th, so around 2 weeks from now. All that information is accessible online, totally shareable, totally public. So if you want to share that with users, if you want to share that with people internally or customers, we encourage that. We want everyone to be up to speed on Workspaces, and that documentation should be a huge help. Okay, I think that is most of the questions we had. I'm not sure we're able to get through everything today, but again, if there are any questions that went unanswered, we're going to follow up to this webinar with specific responses there so that we can be sure to give you an accurate answer to those questions. Before we go, Laura, if you want to go to the next slide, I want to quickly recommend that if you have additional feedback about IdeaScale, either questions about Workspaces or particularly feedback on how the current product operates, I highly, highly suggest that you go to ideas.ideascale.com. Link will be changing with Workspaces. I highly recommend you go to this URL so that you can submit feedback on our product. You can engage with Reshma and I on those ideas, and ideas that gain traction, we then look into for consideration for our product roadmap. So if you think you have a good idea, submit it there. You can engage with other IdeaScale customers there and exchange ideas. And it's just a great way for us to stay in touch with you all and for us to get some of your great ideas onto our roadmap in an efficient manner. So again, I suggest everyone goes to there and submits their good ideas. With that, that will conclude our webinar for today. I hope everyone got a ton of good information on Workspaces and how it relates to everything that is involving your current community and how it can benefit us in the future. So thank you everyone for joining. Thank you team for helping walk through this, and hope you all have a good rest of your week.